inspiration to me and millions of others. The fact is, today we live under a lawless president, a feckless Congress, and an all-powerful Supreme Court. The federal Leviathan consumes nearly 25% of the entire economy and gobbles up whole industries. We are $17.3 trillion in fiscal operating debt. We owe over $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. There's not enough money on the planet Earth to pay that back. And the overall debt, when it's all combined, grows by $5 to $7 trillion a year. And this president proclaims the era of austerity is over. The federal government's now the nation's largest creditor, debtor, lender, employer, consumer, contractor, grantor, property owner, tenant, insurer, healthcare provider, and pension guarantor. So much for limited government. It unleashes thousands of regulations and rules every single year. Over the course of a decade, it fills nearly 1 million pages in the Federal Register. We are being devoured by the very government that is supposed to serve us. The centralization and concentration of power is now moving at breakneck speed as the Constitution's firewalls have been breached. And I don't need a liberal law professor from George Washington to tell me what's going on either. Although we welcome them. The Tea Party movement is the only thing left that stands between what remains of our republic and the tyranny of runaway government. And I say this from the bottom of my heart and my soul. And I thank you. You are the citizens from all walks of life and every corner of the country who possess the spirit and enthusiasm of the Founding Fathers, proclaim the principles of individual liberty and unalienable rights as set forth in our Declaration, and insist on the federal government's compliance with the Constitution's limits. You are astutely aware of the peril of the moment and all that is at stake. And for this, you are smeared and attacked by the ruling class, Democrats and Republicans alike, by the media, from the New York Slimes to the Wall Street Journal, and countless others who are dragging this nation into the abyss. And I know that at times you wonder if we'll be able to reverse course. You wonder if it's all worth it. You wonder if you should live quiet lives among family and friends and tend to your own needs. But I also know you're Americans, and you cannot be idle, and you will not be silent while a relative handful of self-aggrandizing masterminds seek to lord over you and your fellow citizens. You will not your country to fail. Now let me remind you, December 23rd, 1776. When it looked like the American Revolution was lost, what was left of General George Washington's Continental Army gathered for what the history books would describe as the Battle of Trenton. Before those men boarded the rickety wooden boats on a daunting course to cross the frozen Delaware River on that miserable winter night, they began to read aloud from Thomas Paine's The American Crisis. And they repeated these words. This became their motto. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. That's you. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. And and triumph we must, and triumph we will. Now, my dear friend Jeffrey Lord, both of us worked in the Reagan administration, so we're fond of quoting the great Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was fond of quoting Thomas Paine, those exact words that I just read to you. And he would recite them, campaign stop after campaign stop, whether he was running in the Republican primaries or running in the general election. You see, Ronald Reagan was not part of the establishment. He was an outsider. And like you and so many others throughout history, he had the courage to stand up and be counted. And for this, also like you, Reagan and his supporters were disparaged and dismissed by the same ruling class. And I'll give you a few examples. George Will, 1974. Reagan is 63, and he looks it. His hair is still remarkably free of gray, but around the mouth and neck, he looks like an old man. He has never demonstrated substantial national appeal. His hardcore support today consists primarily of the kamikaze conservatives who thought the 1960 Goldwater campaign was jolly fun. And there is reason to doubt that Reagan is well suited to appeal to the electorate that just produced a Democratic landslide. George Will. Chuck Percy, former Republican senator from Illinois. A Reagan nomination and the crushing defeat likely to follow could signal the beginning of the end of our party as an effective force in American life. He said Reagan is far out of the centrist mainstream. The hell is the centrist mainstream anyway? I used to think it was the Constitution. I used to think it was free market. I used to think it was private property rights. Apparently that's now right-wing. John Rhodes, who would become the Republican leader of the always in the minority Republicans in the House at that time, said as soon as Reagan gets away from his cliches and his campaign slogans, he's in trouble. Nelson Rockefeller, who leads the current Republican Party, I think, he warned Republican governors in terms of Reagan's run that no major American party can long endure by directing its appeal to a narrow minority. It will not serve the nation to have our major parties polarized at ideological extremes. Does this not sound familiar to you? So damn many of these, I could go on all day with this. I've got a radio show to do and a president to attack, so I can't stay here. Well, let me end with this one from our friends at the Wall Street Journal editorial page. In 1979, the Wall Street Journal wrote, "For political packaging, we do not need to turn to a 68-year-old man." Well, maybe they'll write tomorrow, for political packaging, we don't need to turn to a 68-year-old woman who would be Hillary Clinton. But I digress. Now, as you heard from my friend Jeff Lord, Gerald Ford went on to lose to a very weak Democrat candidate named Jimmy Carter. Reagan went on to win in 1980 and 84, two of the biggest landslides in American history. Popular vote, I would remind Karl Rove, and Electoral College. Now, having campaigned personally for Reagan in 1976 and 80, I want you to listen. I feel certain he would be enormously proud of you. In fact, I bet he would have been thrilled to stand before you right here. And thank you for all you're doing and all you've done. And congratulate you on this 5th anniversary of the Tea Party movement. And I think think it's appropriate to end my comments with a truism from President Reagan, which is the last paragraph in my book, Liberty and Tyranny, which most of you have heard by now, but I'm going to repeat it anyway, for those of you who haven't. Reagan wrote and said this many times: freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States when men were free. You folks, you're an inspiration to people like me and millions of others. It's a great honor to be here, and on behalf of all those other people and your fellow citizens and generations yet to come, I want to thank you. God bless all of you.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavitto. Where does the time go? And it is their party, and they could cry if they want to, but they are not. Tea Partiers loaded for bear. 5 years to the day they first growled their message to the world. Too much spending, too much taxing, too much lying. So things were going to start changing, and they did, and fast. Beginning with rallies across the nation that tended to grow by the month. A force that would later go on to topple Nancy Pelosi and Democrats in the House and make one John Boehner Speaker of that House. But for all of their commotion, the mainstream media treated Tea Partiers as quaint at best and racist at worst. Not fair, not balanced, not remotely right. A double standard that I pointed out then and point out now showed no standards. Tea Partiers were crackpots. Occupy Wall Streeters were just cool. Tea Partiers defending the flag, well, the wacky right. Occupiers burning the flag, just right on. Cutting taxes was selfish. Living off bigger government, saintly. Anti-spending was bad. Anti-war, well, good. Reading the Constitution in public, pathetic. Ripping it up in public, profound. Tea Partiers divisive. Those occupiers, well, they were incisive. Those covering Tea Party rallies, cracked. Those covering anti-Tea Party rallies, cool. I saw it for myself, just as a reporter out there covering them. The message from the mainstream, just ignore them. Even though there was hardly anything sinister about any of them. No matter, this was not about killing the messengers. Excuse me. This was an all-out push against their message. And it popped up again today. Take a look. The mainstream media constantly slamming it. To those in power having none of it. To no less than the President of the United States mocking it. To powerful Democrats who were demonizing it. Even Republicans turning their back on it. But after 5 years under fire, Tea Partiers still fired up and having none of it. Today, upping the ante and sending a warning to both parties. We've had enough of it, and we've had enough of you.
I've got good news for you, though, and bad news. The good news is your government's open. The bad news is your government's open and still borrowing over $1 million every minute.
Took the gavel out of Nancy Pelosi's hand in 2012. You did that!
You will not allow your country to fail.
Freedom and liberty. Use them or lose them.
To radio talk show host Mark Levin, one of the speakers addressing that crowd today, as he has almost from the very beginning. Mark, good to have you. Of course, it's been a very different 5 years, hasn't it? Controversy in the beginning, but at least it wasn't that way among Republicans. Now it's as if Tea Party types and their message is an anathema to a lot of Republicans. What do you make of it?
Well, what I make of it is the Republican Party has lost its way. And but for the Tea Party movement, which is an American grassroots movement which promotes basic American values, fiscal integrity, limited federal government, constitutionalism, and so forth, there would be no national voice for we the people. So it's not so much that so many of us have lost our way. It's that Washington's lost its way, and you can see it every single day, the way that they spend, the way that they borrow. And so what's happened over a 5-year period? They have unleashed their consultants, their media. They've used the floor of the Senate and the floor of the House to disparage and malign the American people. The Tea Party is a big chunk of the American people. That's what it is.
Do you think it's a third party?
I don't think it's a third party yet, but if the Republican Party continues to trash the Tea Party, that could happen. Look, Reagan in 1976 was right. He said, what is the point of a third party when all we're going to do is continue to elect the left? What the Tea Party is doing is, rather than rallying to the very people who ignore them, who trash them, who will not respond to them in a positive way, they've now gone into primaries, some success, some not, just like the Republicans, just like the Democrats. And they've organized in different ways, which is why they're feared. If they weren't feared, if they weren't a power, they would be ignored.
Do you think that many in the mainstream, though, Mark, see the Tea Party now as more disruptive than helpful?
I hope so, and I think so. I mean, I see these billionaires coming on your show now and then, like this fellow Langone. And
Ken Langone?
he can back at Chris Christie and turn around and back at Cuomo. People are sick and tired of this. That's utterly unprincipled. We don't want these parties to work together. We want to protect the country, preserve the republic, get back to limited government. You know, billionaires and millionaires are not affected so much by what's going on here. Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, high taxes, economic dislocation. We're tired of social engineering coming out of Washington and all these places. There's only one voice in opposition, and that is the collective Tea Party movement. And I'm here to tell you, I went to this event 5 years later. This is a strong, vibrant, thoughtful, smart group of people. I can't speak for all of them, but they're not going anywhere. You want to know why, Neil? There's nowhere to go.
But when you say you don't want the parties working together, even Ronald Reagan found a way for the parties to work together, to his, largely his agenda. But what is so wrong with them working together?
I don't want these two parties with this leadership working together, because what it results in is massive, big government spending. What it results in is amnesty. What it results in is a deterioration of the value of the dollar. Unlimited, unfunded liabilities. If that's working together, we have to break that up. You cannot break up the ruling class and kiss it at the same time.
What do you make of Ken Langone had this argument? My friend Stuart Varney had this argument when he was here. I disagreed strongly with it, but the sentiment goes something like this. You have to keep your powder dry for the big battle, and the big battle is the midterm elections, keeping the focus on Obamacare. Let a lot of this stuff slide right now, including threats of a government shutdown, so we can keep our eyes on the proverbial prize. What do you say?
This is the Washington Manhattan corridor mindset. Put the battle off to the next day. Put the battle off to the next day. The next day is here. We have $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. What happened, Neil, when we had a Republican House and Senate and a Republican president last time? They were the most profligate spenders in American history before we got to Obama. This isn't about a baseball game where we root for this team or that team. We need to change the game. We need to get our players on the field. That is, people who are serious about it.
Well, who are they, Mark? Who are
I'm
those
not going to
players?
sit here and give a whole list. They are people, generally speaking, who are going to put the Constitution, the fiscal nature of this country first, who are going to stop.
All right, so give me a couple of names. Would you indulge
Well,
me?
they're quite obvious. They're Tea Party victors. You can talk Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Rand Paul, in many respects Rubio, and there's on the House side there's a number of people. But what's the point?
You didn't put Chris Christie in that bunch.
No, of course not. Ken Langone supports it. Doesn't that tell you everything you need to know? I mean, Chris Christie is the billionaire's favorite Republican. Look, these guys who keep talking in platitudes, we got to work together to do what? I want to know what. What are they going to do about the $100 trillion unfunded liability? That's the question that needs to be asked to every single one of them, because it's going to destroy our country. Neil, they keep talking about repealing Obamacare, Have you seen a repeal proposal? What exactly in Obamacare are they going to repeal? A bunch of Republican governors just said they don't want to repeal it anymore.
That's what I was just going to follow up on. I mean, and by the way, just to clarify for folks listening, we do have a nearly $14 trillion debt. When Mark refers to the unfunded liabilities, that's when you get up to close to $100 trillion. So you were quite right about that. But let me ask you a little bit about what these Republican governors are saying, because talk about shooting the message here. The message among these Republicans who are putting it all on Obamacare, making that the front and center issue, these Republican governors are saying, you know, when push comes to shove, we're not going to be able to get rid of this thing. So therein lied the whole reason for this caving on these issues was taken away because they don't think that they're going to be able to punt this thing away.
The double talk's not going to fly anymore, and not just for Republicans. You know, there's a lot of people out there who can identify with a Democrat one election, a Republican another election, or sit out an election altogether. These people need leadership, and they need people who are going to talk straight with them. Not straight, oh, we got to work together. No. We've got to change the trajectory of the nation, and we've got to do it soon.
Do you think that it veers, or that you risk, Mark, and you and I have chatted about this before, that with the best of intentions, you risk creating such a fire on the right that you lose all the right, and that it gets to be so extreme, so nasty, so vituperative, that you really can't get it back?
You know, I'm going to tell you something, Neil. The largest group from a philosophical and political perspective in this country are conservatives. Conservative Democrats, conservative Republicans, conservatives who are disgusted with all parties and both parties in politics. Reagan made the point in 1976. He said, we don't run away from this group. This is the biggest group of Americans in the nation. We need to embrace them. We need to organize them. We need to give them a reason to vote. He said this in 76 when he was taking on a sitting President Gerald Ford, who claimed to be a conservative. And when Ford lost, he blamed it on Reagan. And then in 1980, the Bush family rose up, and Bob Dole and Howard Baker to try and stop Reagan. They said he cannot win. He's an extremist. The same kind of language that it's not yours, but you're the devil's advocate you're pointing out. The point is, an articulate, knowledgeable conservative with an articulatable agenda who can do it with confidence and connect with the American people is going to win.
I don't see that yet among the cast of characters. Still early. I see that people who can articulate some of that. But Ronald Reagan had an ability to sort of coalesce all of that.
No. As a matter of fact, in 74 and 75, he was trashed heavily by the Wall Street Journal. He was trashed heavily within his own party.
Oh, I know, the voodoo economics. I'm just saying today, that crowd, when you mentioned the Cruzes and the Rand Pauls and the others, do you think that they would be able to bring all of that together in an appealing way to the American public that for some reason or another looks at a lot of these guys with a raised eyebrow?
Well, I don't know. And we're going to find out.
Well, I want you to know. That's what you're a rock star to them. You should know.
That's the nature of the political process, isn't it? But
yeah.
I will tell you what we'll lose, because I just saw it. A Romney, a McCain, a Dole, another Bush.
Yeah.
That I know we'll lose.
But you know, you've also been critical of Fox News. I've been listening to you, and you rap some personalities on Fox. Well, do you hate Fox now?
Oh, I love Fox.
Tell the truth.
You know, when I was a school board member, a teacher union president got up in the audience once and said to me, "Why do you hate teachers?" I said, "I love teachers. I just hate your union." I love Fox. There's a number of people on Fox who are my friends. You're my friend, and there's some people I disagree with. Why can't I voice that?
Okay, you just seem a little
I want Fox to exist for as long as possible. Now, right. MSLSD, now there's a waste of time and footprint right over there.
Mark, I knew we'd end on a little funny note there. It's always good having you.
God bless you, my brother.
Mark Levin, agree or disagree with him, he is a force to be reckoned with.